from her point of view, it was clearly all me.
And walking away with assignments that absolutely did not work.
Nobody checks at the end to see, did they even stay together?
And for this to be activated by professionals is tragic. It's irresponsible. It's horrible. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Neurodivergent Connections, where we are three different neurotypes who talk about our experience in relationships and our experience in the world. I am Greg Fuqua, licensed mental health counselor in the state of Iowa. I'm neurodiverse couples therapist and an autistic clinical specialist. And I am, as always, joined with Mona Kay, social worker, PhD, host of the Neurodiverse Love podcast, and the amazing Scott Simpson, who is an AuDHDer. And by the way, Mona's a late diagnosed ADHD, and I'm also late self-identified autistic. So today's episode, therapy, and about the neurodiverse experience or adventures in counseling and therapy. And there is good, there is bad, there is damaging, there is helpful, and we're here to discuss our experiences and things to think about as you may be seeking out help from other professionals.
I would love to start with the hellish stuff. Because I'm sure you guys can share, both the good and the bad. I have not had any good experiences with therapists who my ex-husband and I went to for couples counseling. And I think, Greg, if we had come to you, you would have known immediately what our neurotypes were, and you would have shared with us some thoughts and helped us at least go down that path about, that we might be neurologically wired differently. I always knew we were wired differently, but I didn't know why. So During our separation, we went to 3 different therapists. And really, it was in the hopes that we could save our marriage. And all 3 of them were men, because I let my ex-husband pick them. And I didn't care. I just wanted him to go for therapy. And they were all probably wonderful therapists. But the thing is, I looked like a crazy, emotionally distraught partner. I was hyperverbal. I shared a lot about, my feelings, the lack of emotional reciprocity, our communication challenges, how I felt he was oftentimes cold and stoic and would just shut down. And I looked like, I was crazy. And he sat there pretty silent. He looked like the perfect client. And I did not look good. And I was just being honest and sharing the turmoil we'd gone through. We had always loved each other, but we were just experiencing so much disconnect. And, we paid a lot of money for that. For me to look like a crazy person. And then the things they would ask us to do, I was 100% in. I was like, yeah, I'll try anything. And then he would oftentimes say, yeah, I'll do it. And then it didn't happen. And I don't even know if he remembered half the time. I don't know what kind of state he was in, if he was in, kind of a freeze state or he was in the fawning state, because I'm sure I overwhelmed him. So 3 therapists, probably thousands of dollars, many hours of sitting there thinking maybe this could help us, and walking away with assignments that absolutely did not work at all. So that's a little bit of what I experienced. What about you guys? Any experience with couples counseling that worked or didn't?
I had one that was an awful lot like yours, Mona. My wife and I got to something of, like, it felt like a crisis point. Like we really needed to step in and have somebody straighten us out and figure out what was actually going on, because we kept going in circles. We kept having the same kinds of arguments, and me being autistic and her, neither of us understanding that, and then whatever she brings to the table, we didn't know what to do because we both felt like we were doing our best, but it wasn't getting anywhere. So I showed up probably like your husband, Mona, smiling and polite and on time. And I would do the homework and I would give all the right answers. And it looked probably to the therapist like, I don't see what she's complaining about. This guy is ready, willing, and able to do everything we ask. And he admits to everything he's ever said. And he's remarkably level-headed compared to how volatile she is seeming with her frustration. It wasn't like I just kept hoping that it would make things better, because I was like, I'm doing it all right. I'm doing everything you ask. Tell me I'm doing it right. If I do it all perfectly, you'll love me. You'll just like give me a break for a change. And it didn't work that way because she didn't want to do the homework. She resented the therapist thought that she had any role in this. From her point of view, it was clearly all me. I'm the one who can't talk about things. I'm the one who starts crying when things get intense. I'm the one who's not delivering the love and support and reciprocity. And I'm the one who's not ever leaving the house with friends. I'm also the one who's saying every once in a while, could you remind me that I need friends? Like, because I know that I do need friends and this is something I should do, but I just forget that that's a thing. Could you do that? And she's like, no, I shouldn't have to.
That's right.
I'm like, well, then that's not going to happen because I need help with. I know now that I need help with that, and if it's not going to be from a person, I'll have to. There, maybe that's a reminder now on my phone saying go meet friends. So yeah, with couples therapy, it was through an EAP. It was the Employee Assistance Plan. I don't know if you have those in the United States of America.
Yes. Yep.
So for people who like me don't have jobs anymore, and for people who've never used a program like this, if you work for a company that's big enough, they have a toll-free number that you can call and say, oh my God, everything's falling apart. Book me somebody soon and fast. And they'll say, we have 2 people in your city, maybe, or a couple cities away, who we can book you in and are covered by this. Would you like an appointment? You show up, whatever. So you don't so much get to browse and go, I want somebody who knows about this and specializes in this and is accepting of this and this affirming. No, you get the one they tell you to go to and you hope they're good. And often, if there are more than one, they're both in the same office working for the same company. So there's no guarantee of quality. There's no they see you, they bill the company, they get paid. Nobody checks at the end to see, did they even stay together? So you get to keep doing your job whether you suck at it or not. This makes sense. I need a job like this where I don't have to be good.
Well, Scott,
the only job I heard about like that was like the weatherman. He doesn't have to be right and he still gets to forecast.
Yeah, that's funny. So I think that's really funny because it made me think of something. I actually, after I found out we were a neurodiverse couple, I called all 3 of the therapists, right? And I said, do you have any experience working with neurodiverse couples? And they said, no. And I said, well, do you know anybody in the area that does? And they're like, no, I only know people that work with children who are autistic. One of the therapists actually said to me, I think I can help you. You should come back, even though he had no training in working with neurodiverse couples. So I want to say that to folks who are listening or watching, because therapists who have no experience in working with neurodiverse couples should not be working with neurodiverse couples. And I'll just give you one example. So if the therapist says you need to have more eye contact with your partner, right? And because they need to know that you're attuning with them. I mean, that could be so painful and debilitating. And if the autistic partner isn't doing it, they're looked at as like non-compliant or non-participatory,
Mm-hmm.
but it has nothing to do with that.
Or worse.
Yeah, or worse. So, and then for the non-autistic partner, to not be validated or to be affirmed for the maybe lack of emotional reciprocity because they're overwhelming their partner has alexithymia. If the therapist doesn't understand all that, they're going to do so much harm. So that's just a few examples. What about you, Greg?
I deal with this constantly, and I've dealt with it personally. I've dealt with it as a clinician. Even when I came to my self-identification, my first three therapists proceeded to gaslight me about it. Oh no, you're not autistic. You just have relational trauma, right? And so, guess what? I had people that didn't have the right lens, that didn't understand me. And so could they really help me? And I hear these stories from my clients and my couples every single time they come in. And it's partially, so number one is that we are so far behind in this field as it relates to neurodiversity. We are still in a pathology model. We still People aren't yet caught up to the changing paradigms of how important our wiring is. And having that lens to understand what is happening is critical in helping somebody. Because if you're misappropriating your sources, the skills, the tools, right, then of course it's not going to work. And so, like the idea of the eye contact thing. So I have a client, a female autistic ADHD client, and she was like, I had one therapist who really wanted to work with me on eye contact. And they went over and over again. And of course, she just got traumatized by it. One of my own therapists in group therapy had me do an exercise to stare into one of the other group members' eyes. And I couldn't do it. I just started bawling. And tears are pouring down, and my eyes are shifting away and shifting back while that person is literally piercing the depthness of my soul with her vision. That's how intense it was. And so think about that kind of damage on a micro level, but then for couples, to be so lost and then to be misseen and misunderstood. We already have enough baggage, both as neurodiverse couples and as neurodivergent individuals, around how we're not doing it right, how we don't fit in. And for this to be activated by professionals is tragic. It's irresponsible. It's horrible. It's damaging. And do no harm, is also one of the pledges we have too. So, your question to your couples therapist, which is really great, which is, do you have any experience with neurodiverse couples? Their answer should be yes, but I'm not aware of it.
Yes, I've ruined a few.
I'm sure I have, but they're now gone, right?
Yeah.
But I made a lot of money working with them. They were really desperate.
Yeah, but now I get to counsel one of them on what they are now convinced was their narcissist ex.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so if I, as a therapist, have a couple coming to me, this is what my clients tell me. You are the first person that has made my partner, my autistic partner, feel known, seen, safe, and understood. Think about the possibilities when you have established that with somebody, and think about the damage when you can't establish that and you continue to be lost, you continue to self-blame. It's really hard, and again, a lot of my couples are saying, you're the first person that's understood our dynamic and the whys behind it and how to help us. And it's true, there is neurotypical gaslighting in the world. And it's playing out all the time for us. And an awareness around this is absolutely critical.
Yeah. Yeah, I think both partners can be gaslighted, and I think both partners can be seen as narcissists. I remember my ex-husband telling me during our separation that he thought I was a narcissist, right? And I know he went to one of the therapists, one of the couples therapists on his own. He didn't ask me if that was okay. So that's another issue we can talk about, because some therapists like to see individual partners separately and then they'll see the couple together. But it should be discussed. It should be something that is agreed upon. So that I had a problem with too. But he called me a narcissist. And oh my God, talk about being destroyed, because here I am, a social worker. I've always felt that I'm a very giving, loving person. But now, understanding our different neurotypes, I think I get what he was talking about. And I could see this happening in therapy because I don't have a problem with telling him, or I didn't have a problem with telling him what I needed, what I wanted, or what I wanted us to do, or asking questions. And then when he wasn't able to add anything to the discussion, to then move forward and make a decision. To him, that looked like narcissism, because it wasn't something that came easily to him. You know, he was not able to make decisions quickly. And so even though I saw that as a strength, all those things that I'd been doing for all these years in our relationship, I guess he was, looking on the internet, he thought I was a narcissist. The same thing can go for the non-autistic partner looking at their autistic partner, saying, they spend 6 hours each day on the weekend doing what they want, and they don't care about, the childcare or the household jobs or whatever needs to be done as a family or a couple. And it's all about them. When the fact of the matter is, if you had the right therapist or coach, you can understand why the two of you are doing the things you're doing and how you can meet each other in the middle.
Sure. Well, this is a double empathy problem.
Yes.
Right? We're both focused on our needs and we don't understand each other, right? And we're double and tripling down on, this ain't working. You don't understand me, And of course, yes, and I hear this all the time, and there are aspects of narcissism that happen, I think, with neurodivergence and also trauma, because there's all these really self-focused, self-protective mechanisms that happen around this, that yes, there can be some distortions around this. And again, it goes to this idea of, I think pathology versus normalizing our differences and having the right lens to see them.
Yeah, I think you talk about the double empathy. I see it. We're blind both ways sometimes if we're in a paradigm that doesn't even allow for different ways of thinking. We're both guilty of thinking that we've got it figured out. Why can't you see it? Right. And as long as we all believe that that there's a way to be, we're being it. Why aren't you? Mm-hmm. We're still going to be stuck. And I don't. It's like, as much as I want to yell at people for that, I don't really blame them, because if they don't know that there's another way to think about it, I don't want to blame people for just jumping to like, he's a narcissist, because there's no other option. Somebody has to be, if you are looking at the world through a lens that says there's a normal, and then anything outside of that is a sign of crazy.
Yeah.
And we need to get past that. And I think,
Yeah. And the same thing with women that are getting diagnosed as bipolar, and having anxiety, depression. Yeah. A lot of things that are borderline that are related. They could be autistic, they could be ADHD, they could be AuDHD, but they also could be struggling in a relationship that they thought was going to be like all the other relationships they've seen that were not neurodiverse relationships, right? So the more education we can get out there, my dream is that one day every single university and college that trains helping professionals, whether they are medical or they're dealing with mental health, that they all have a required course in neurodivergence and specifically adult neurodivergence. Because I remember when I first learned about this, one of the things people would say to me oftentimes is, well, you can grow out of autism or you can grow out of ADHD. And it's like, really? Then how come there's all these adults who are autistic ADHD or ADHD? So that is, that's still, I think, out there. People still think that. I don't think it's as commonplace, but it's still out there. The other thing that I'd love to talk about is some of the therapeutic models that are working. And I will tell you one that has helped me as an ADHDer, a late identified ADHDer, and that is somatic therapy. So on an individual level, and I think my ex could have benefited from it too, and specifically somatic experiencing that was created by Dr. Peter A. Levine. He's an amazing trauma expert. In fact, he's written so many terrific books, but somatic experiencing therapists and coaches are out there. You can go to their website. What about you guys? What do you feel has worked for you individually or in couples therapy or coaching?
Yep, I think you're on the right track. So when people ask me, all right, we can't see you, Greg, because you have 100-person wait list. Who should we look for? What do we look for? Blah blah blah. And I'm always like brain body modalities that combine both. CBT, as we've talked about before, is a little bit dangerous in some ways. And, there are both strengths and limitations around using the body, understanding the body as a source of information, as a warning system, as a source of wisdom. And for autistics, this can be very helpful to expand this area and make connections between the two. And some of these are, number one, you've already mentioned somatic experiencing. The modality I work in primarily is internal family systems, which I love. There's EMDR is another one. Brain spotting is another one. There is a couple more that I'm not coming to my head right now, but that's one to look for in your therapist. Someone who has experience around that will be and can be helpful, particularly for neurodivergence. Now, there isn't one size fits for any neurodivergent. It's just there's too much diversity out there, and it all depends on, again, that interface between their wiring and their experience, or the hardware and the software, as I call it too. For couples too, a lot of Gottman principles work as well, I would say, and it's just important, though, to have more of a neurodiverse lens on this too, even more than just that.
Yeah, I agree. What about you, Scott? I know you've mentioned that you had gone for cognitive behavioral therapy. Is that something that you felt worked?
Yes, but not in a good way now. I've been thinking about this over recent weeks. More and more, the more I learn about the neurodiversity movement and that whole paradigm and the politics around it. I was a CBT evangelist for a long time because I could see the power in it. It was like, but it was kind of like having the dark side of the force. It was just a little too powerful. Because in me, I found it was an incredible, I can see in hindsight, it was an incredible masking tool. It made me okay with things. I could talk myself out of feeling bad for things that I had every reason to feel bad about. And so I used it to narrow my experience. The skill of spotting something going on in your head, throwing it up against the truth, and then, possibly readjusting how you feel about it. I think it's great. And I think maybe for neurotypical people, they can use it in moderation. But for me, it's too much of a mood adjuster. It saved me from having to feel my feelings as they were. It distanced me from that. And it suited me so well because I always felt like I thought my feelings more than I feel my feelings. But I've seen some stuff recently that suggests that one reason CBT doesn't work for autistic people so well sometimes is that we actually do feel our feelings before we think our thoughts sometimes. Like there are times when we feel a thing and then we look for thoughts to explain
Yes.
the
Yep.
sensation,
Yep.
which from what I was understood through CBT is not supposed to work that way. CBT tells me that I thought something which made me feel something. So if I've been inversely experiencing that and yet applying the technology of CBT to it, it kind of scares me that it worked because I don't know what it was doing to me. So for some people, it's great. I don't know how you'd use it in a couple where one person finds it useful and the other one finds it's ruining them.
Yeah.
Greg, I before it slips my mind for a sixth time, this will take us off on a brief tangent. And if we had commercials in this show, this would be a great place for a commercial break. But that thing you said about staring in the eyes, do you know much about Scientology?
No, I don't.
The Church of Scientology was founded by a science fiction writer and prolific author and war veteran named L. Ron Hubbard, who, having gone through his own poor experience with modern psychiatry, decided that psychiatry was evil and that he was going to write an alternative. He used what I'm afraid EMDR might be, in that he would get people to recall traumatic events and go through them over and over again until they're flat on it, or laughing. It's a neat idea, but he, I think, was autistic and possibly more, and he was effectively working out his stuff on everybody else and making them pay for it. The reason I go through this convoluted thing is Scientology's bad. Don't do it. Don't even try. Autistic people will love it because it has rules and procedures and promises results. And it seems very much you show up, you do what you're supposed to do, you win. So don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. However, the thing that they bring people in off the street to do is usually called, the very first course is called communication. It's a communications course. And they do a series of what they call training routines, TRs. TR 0, the very first one that you have to do is to sit knee to knee with someone in chairs and look into their eyes. And if you flinch, blink, smile, show any expression, you flunk. And you keep doing this until you can sit there and tolerate staring someone in the eyes.
Oh.
Now, they say it is to help you confront reality. However, as autistic people, I think we can see they're basically seeing who will withstand torture. And then it gets worse from there. So never do it. And if a couple's making you do it, that makes me a little suspicious. Or a couple therapists. Yeah. If a therapist is making you do this and pay for it, I don't know what they think they're trying to accomplish. Not with us.
There are other these modalities that are out there that I won't name that my clients have brought into me, and I'm like, let me tell you how wrong this is. And what's funny is that there's all these cult-like aspects to them too. It's like, well, you number one is that you need to stop seeing your therapist and do this program. I'm like, that ain't a warning sign for you. Like we need to isolate you and rewire your brain in the ways we want you to. The problem with CBT is you've kind of outlined some of that too, which is that, we're already stuck in our heads enough. Yes, it can be a point of strength, but it's also can be problematic. And we need other ways of working and understanding. And we're also likely to get what I call the neurotypical gaslighting with a CBT therapist, meaning, why don't you just reframe and think about this in a different way? For some people, it just isn't like that, and to not understand that, again, makes you go back to this idea of self-blame. Like, what's wrong with me? I can't do this. I can't stare into somebody's eyes. I can't just reframe this thing that's perseverating in my brain, that's stuck there. And to go back to your point, Scott, on the feelings impacting the brain. I'm going to give you a really good example of this because I see it all the time, and I did this too. And this comes out of I see this all the time with demand avoidance. Okay. And this is a problem with couples a lot that we'll probably get into in another episode. But a lot of autistics create projected negative external narratives out of their own demand avoidance. Meaning, what do? We're not liking this, so you must be wrong. The world must be wrong. Let's find every argument and excuse that we can. And, working with some of my clients, I see this constantly. And so I'll have a client that starts saying, well, I'm kind of frustrated with myself. I really want to create some change. I really want to focus on making some gains. And you can tell they're starting to build up, and there's a pressure that's starting to build up with that, which is, I really want to do something. I want to create a change, pressure, pressure, pressure. And then they're like, but I don't matter, and I don't matter in the world, so never mind. And I'm like, whoa, that really relieved some tension in you, didn't it? And they're like, what? No, it's true. And I'm like, no, really, you just built up all of this pressure about what you wanted to do, and then you relieved it with this negative projected narrative that's absolute, and it gets you out of it right away. Now, that's kind of an extreme example, but I see this all the time. And I'm like, is this demand avoidance, or are you misappropriating the sources of your own discomfort and managing them through argumentation, rationalization, intellectualism, which is often a strength for the autistic person, right? So that's another good example of something that someone is going to miss and try to treat it with CBT, and it won't work.
Yeah. That is
I got kicked out of therapy for that kind of thing.
Yeah. See,
I was in a group therapy program, and I was unable to. They didn't know what to do with me because it was a group about not doing something, and I kept doing it. And I would come to group the next week and give a thorough intellectual breakdown of all the risk steps that I walked past, and how I could do a complete accounting as per their explanations and models of how people do these things. And then they'd look at me, then why'd you do it if you know all this? I'd be like, I don't know. That's why I'm here. You tell me. And they're like, well, if you do all the stuff we say, you shouldn't be doing it. I'm like, uh-huh. And they're like, well, then you're distracting the other group members by not complying. So we're not helping you anymore. Oh, good for your stats then.
But what you're saying, Scott, is the reality for so many neurodiverse couples that I meet. So I do a neurodiverse couple support group, and usually have anywhere from 4 to 6 couples in there. What's so great about that is they get to see other couples who are experiencing the exact same thing that they have been experiencing, because they've never met, most of the times they've never met another neurodiverse couple, right? Because if you're coming to therapy, even if you're going to somebody like Greg, you're only talking to the therapist, you're not seeing other couples. So there's that aha moment, usually the first session, because we do 4 weeks in a row, of I'm not alone, okay? And my partner is very much like all these other partners, whether they're neurotypical, autistic ADHD, or ADHD, it doesn't matter. So they realize they're not alone. And then there's some like validation and normalizing that if you go outside and talk to your friends and your family members and other people, like in a support group where there is no neurodivergence, or you don't have a neurodiverse aware and affirming facilitator, you're going to get negated, you're going to feel worse, and it's horrible. So I love doing these support groups because both partners feel like they have a say and they feel like they're not crazy. However, what you're saying, Greg and Scott, is something that I hear over and over again. We go to these groups or we go to a therapist and they say they're going to do it. And I know they heard it and they can repeat back verbatim what they're supposed to do. And then they don't do it, right? So I would love to hear for those folks who are struggling with it. They love their partner. They know that they're an intelligent person, and they're really challenged because they're spending all this money and they're maybe wasting all this time. They know their partner is capable of making some of these changes, but they're not happening. Is there, and maybe this is to Greg, is there a model, a therapeutic model that you think works best with this? Or is it literally looking at demand avoidance? Is it looking at other things that might be underneath it? And it really doesn't matter what therapeutic model you use. Yeah, you're shaking your head. Okay, I'd love to hear this because I know this is going to resonate with a lot of folks who've done the therapy. They thought their partner was going to participate. They thought their partner was going to be compliant, and the partner thought they would be, and it just doesn't happen.
Number one thing that you need is safety between a couple, okay? And one of my, what I call the laws of physics of neurodivergence is pressure and stress will amplify neurodivergent traits and adaptations. So if you've got safety, or if you don't have safety, which is you have pressure, you have stress, you have demand, you have expectation, okay, you are not going to get an autistic to move very well through that.
That's it.
Okay. And this is why we see the pursuer avoidant dynamic so often in neurodiverse couples too. So what do we have to do is we have to unmesh and we have to create safety. And we also have to understand the dynamics, the power dynamics, the differences between processing, the difference between your styles of thinking, where things are coming from. A lot of communication is just missing each other, you know. So one of the things, and again, the anxious mind tends to fill in what we don't understand negatively and see it as a threat. So we need safety. So a good example of this is I'm working with a neurodiverse couple, and she's ADHD. She's giving this big story, this big narrative, but for me, I am reading it all as emotional narratives, okay? But she's making connections and making connections and making connections and making connections, and I see him, and he is completely lost, and he is reading the information. He is reading content, okay? And so then when he reacts to her, it's a total misattunement. And she is like, and he's like, you know, I am trying hard to fix this in a concrete way, right? And I'm like, she wants to know you understand her emotions. So I have a client, an amazing client that I've started working with, an autistic guy. And he's like, I've had a breakthrough. And I'm like, oh, goody, goody, goody. He's like, I am now recognizing I have to separate information and content so I can focus on the emotional content with my wife. That's the whole thing that's been going on. And often I say, and I love the way he said it, and he said it better than I did, but I often talk about, I always say, no, look underneath what they're saying, you know, find the emotion underneath, look for that context. And that changed their dynamic immediately, you know. And so that was just a great example of that misattunement, that need for the neurodiverse lens, and also understanding those dynamics and understanding also need for safety and unmeshing is a big starting point and key in what I work on for couples right away.
It's so important. And I say that all the time in the couples group, that you are probably not emotionally safe for each other. You're not, because you've had ongoing trauma with each other and you don't even realize it. Most likely, you've had ongoing trauma in your life if you're the neurodivergent partner and you didn't know it for your entire life. And so until you can feel safe with your partner, your nervous system is going to be repeatedly dysregulated. The cortisol is going to be spewing throughout your body, and you're going to be in that, trauma response. You're going to freeze, you're going to flee, You're going to fight or you're going to fawn. My ex-husband was a fawner oftentimes. And this is another thing that happens, I think, in therapy. And I hear this often, is that the autistic or autistic ADHD partner will say, yes, 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 I'll do, I'll do, I'll do. And that fawning, that people pleasing. And they really have every intent of doing it. I really do feel like many of them do, right? And they can literally, my ex used to be able to say this. He used to repeat verbatim. He'd memorize exactly what I was asking or exactly what was asked of him in therapy. And I'm like, you can memorize that. You can repeat it back to me, but you're not doing it. Right. And so, right. But I wasn't emotionally safe and he wasn't emotionally safe for me. So we didn't feel safe. And then there were all those expectations and demands. This could be so helpful for therapists, if we have any therapists that are listening or watching. If you are a therapist or a coach and you're working with couples and you recognize any of the things that we're talking about, there is a good chance that you are working with a neurodiverse couple. And I would beg you, and I mean beg you, to please not do any more harm and find a therapist or coach who has expertise in working with neurodiverse couples to refer this couple to, or dive deep and get the training that you need to work with them so you don't do any more harm. Because I don't think any of these therapists that I worked with my ex-husband, wanted to do us any harm, but they did.
Mona, Greg, I have a question, and you guys would probably know the answer to this. We've been pretty thorough about the damage that can be done to a neurodivergent person in neurotypical therapy. But from the other side, are there fears from the non-autistic, non-ADHD person saying that I'm a little worried about going to your kind of counselor because they're just going to say, well, don't worry about it. This is just how he is.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Greg, I'd love your thoughts.
Well, I think this goes back to what Mona was saying about, I get so many couples because they're wanting the guy to feel comfortable. I'm going to be on their side enough or get their perspective enough, which goes to show, you do need somebody who gets it. But I think this also goes for, and I've had this experience too with couples where the quote unquote neurotypical partner starts to not like me because guess what? I'm on the other person, the autistic person's side. And I get them and I'm explaining it in ways that that is affirming, that is validating.
But do they think that you're just letting them off the hook all the time?
Well, I think that that's part of it, which is they don't, I hear this so often. And him being autistic isn't an excuse, and I'm like, oh crap, we're in trouble because of course it's not an excuse, but if it's perceived of that, then how much resistance do you have to learning about him or learning about her and the way they're autistic, right? Because there's already this negative bias there, which is, and there are ways of saying this too, so there are ways of owning it, so I'll even have ADHD partners who will say, and I'm really trying to create that lens for my partner, and I'm saying, oh, that's my ADHD. And I'm like, don't say it's your ADHD because you're pointing to the ADHD, say I am an ADHDer and I struggle with this ownership, right? It's ownership. It's those I statements, right? And so you have to sort of rework that. And in the same way for an autistic person has to, not just say, oh, well, it's because of this, it's because of that, right? And it's externalized. So to me, healthy internalization is so important and being aware of what I call toxic externalization.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And so as the non-autistic partner who didn't know she was ADHD when we were going for therapy, this is what I learned is that I needed to regulate my nervous system. I've talked about this before, right? So verbally attacking my partner in therapy, getting so emotional that I could barely talk at times, not realizing my role in all the conflict or the miscommunication or the misunderstanding, right?
Right.
Both
Right.
needed to acknowledge that we were doing our own dance to protect ourselves, to
Yes.
keep ourselves safe, and that it wasn't healthy anymore, that we had gotten toxic. My ex once said, he says, our marriage has cancer. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of a good way of looking at it. We need to we need chemotherapy, or we need something else. We need to remove the tumors.
Yeah.
But I think understanding your own role in the dynamic is important, but also I wanted to change him, right? And I said
Yes.
that over and over again. If he could just change this, and I know he had things that he wanted me to change. I remember him once saying to me during our separation, I need you to stop screaming at me. He had never said that in 29 years. So I think we both partners need to understand that you have specific needs in a romantic relationship, right? You have wants and preferences, and maybe desires and dreams, and they may no longer be compatible with your partner once you realize that you're a neurodiverse couple. And I think that is one of the, I don't know if you see this, Greg, it's one of the hardest things that I hear from people who still love each other. We're going to therapy, we're doing the groups, we're doing the work, or we still love each other very much, but nothing seems to be working. And I really do believe I'm kind of the poster child for that after 30 years of loving each other, nothing was working because my ex said to me he didn't want to do the work. I wanted to do the work. And that is something that I oftentimes hear and see. One partner wants to do the work, the other doesn't. They're just exhausted. And it can be either partner. And so there's so many things, Scott, I think that we have to look at, but sometimes you're just no longer compatible. And no matter how many therapists you go to and all the different types of therapy that you try, accepting that and grieving, and I do believe grieving is really important. And I do that in the couples support group. I take folks through the 7 stages of grieving. Grieving for the relationship you thought you were going to have when you entered your relationship, and you kept hoping you were going to have, no matter what your neurotype, you kept hoping you were going to have. And then you realize you're a neurodiverse couple. You go for therapy, try to get help. Nothing seems to be working. And then you realize, okay, maybe we're just not compatible anymore. We can still love each other, but we're not compatible.
But on the flip side,
go for it.
On the flip side, I'm gonna take a big needle full of, hope and stick it in that giving up sandwich.
I tried for 30 years. Believe me, I didn't give up overnight.
I know and you didn't know. I mean, you didn't know. All the times you were trying, ultimately that effort resulted in more pain. Like you just separated each other further, and became further entrenched in the idea that you had that the other person just should shut the fuck up. Like that.
Or speak.
You got stuck in that, and
yeah.
So a whole world of possibilities open up when you stop thinking that the only things that can possibly work are the things other people have told you should work. So for your relationship, if you've always wanted to get into swingers, if you've always wanted to live in separate homes, if you've always wanted to have a separate room where you can go and just do your special interests and have an intercom where the rest of your family can go, hey, just to let you know, we're gonna eat together and play a game. You want to come? And then you can go, yeah, because you didn't bother me. You can invent whatever life you want.
Exactly.
If you are compatible with each other, imagine how incredible.
Yes.
You could build a relationship together that addresses what you two need, not what the world around you told you should have.
100%.
It's a neat idea. It could also be the terrible thing that you have to grieve. I'm not going to preach much.
I 100% agree. And the last stage in the grieving process is acceptance. And the acceptance is around accepting that you have very different wired brains, that you have very different operating systems, right? The software and the hardware, and that you can change the way you look at each other and focus on the things that you were compatible on in the beginning that maybe you've forgotten because you focus so much on the challenges and the things that didn't work. So it literally is acceptance and then transformation.
I love your point, Scott, which I think is brilliant, because a lot of what I try to do is we try to point out, what becomes all these negative assumptions about one another. And when we really get down to it, nobody's actually trying to hurt each other.
Yes.
And what if we can rework our perspective with some positive assumptions about one another? And I'd also say that it's not always the therapist's fault, and that's what you guys are outlining here, is the couple's mindset is so key to this. And sometimes the mindset can't work. Sometimes one partner doesn't want to be seen this way, or doesn't want to do the work, or doesn't really want to do that hard stuff there. And then secondly, it is always a dynamic. There isn't one person that's wrong in a relationship, okay? It's how it interfaces, right? And so having accurate understanding is so critical. So I just love the points that we sort of are kind of ending on here. I just think it's wonderful.
Yeah, me too. And I guess I want to say to the listeners or the viewers that I do believe that neurodiverse relationships can be amazing. I've had several since my divorce, and I have a thing for autistic or autistic ADHD men. I just do. And that's just who I am. And I can't tell you guys how many times in my support group for the non-autistic partners, and it's mostly women, they say, I'm afraid that if I leave this relationship, I'll find another autistic partner, right? Greg's shaking his head.
With any luck.
And I'm like, well, there were things you fell in love with regarding your partner, right? And so if you find a partner who has things that you really love, and now you have the knowledge you didn't have then, and you're working on yourself, it could be the best relationship ever. And I have several folks that I do coaching with. That's exactly what happened. They spent all these years not knowing, divorced their partner, and now they're in a new relationship with another autistic man, but it's a totally different dynamic. So I just want folks to know, if you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person, right? We're all different. Yeah. Do you guys have any other?
To that point.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Sorry, Mona. I got to get this one out. So yes, this is a really good point. And I think that the gravity between relationships, meaning who you're attracted to, believe it or not, is often meant for you to expose the own work that you should be doing in some way. It's
Absolutely.
Really strange, but it's a very 100%. True thing. So will you be attracted to the same problems? Probably, because they're partially yours.
Yes.
And the potential for corrective experiences around that and healing experiences around it when it can work, when you can work through those with that person that knows how to push your buttons and your triggers, is so powerful as well. And so I just want to throw that out there.
Exactly. And that's what imago therapy is all about. IMAGO, right? Harville Hendrix and his wife, they talk about we will marry or we will be in relationship with the person who reminds us of the caretaker that we had the most challenges with. And I absolutely believe that because my father died almost 20 years ago and I didn't realize he was autistic. So I know that I'm working out that stuff with my dad. I think I'm very close to it. Yeah. So that's another therapeutic model that can be, I think, helpful for neurodiverse couples, but there's a lot of things that don't necessarily apply, but I think it could be another helpful tool. Scott, I see you're thinking. Do you want to have the last words on this?
I was just distracted by how entertaining my thoughts were when I misheard you just say horrible Hendrix and Imago.
Oh, no, Harville.
And it just felt like a Pixar. I know, but it sounds like a Pixar movie to me. In the movie Imago, horrible Hendrix tries to solve the mysteries of people who just won't see eye to eye with each other, and they locks them in the room together. Anyway,
Another simple way of summing this up is we know ourselves better in relationships. Relationships are so important for our own growth, for our own enrichment, for our own understanding of ourselves. And it's a beautiful thing when it can work.
Yeah. So I think the lesson in this hour-long discussion is make sure your therapist or coach has expertise, not just they went to a course, a CEU course, but they have expertise in working with neurodiverse couples or neurodivergent folks. And I really feel if they have lived experience, it takes it to a whole other level, right? Because lived experience, and they don't all have to have lived experience, but I think that takes it to a whole other level.
Because of the way we grow up, autistic people have to become bilingual. We end up having to speak our language and the other language. If you can find someone who speaks both of your languages, your therapy session will go better.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
love
agree.
that.
So like,
Love it.
right, and subscribe, and let us know if you agree with what we're saying, if there are other topics you would like us to discuss, and we hope that you'll share this with other folks that you think it would be helpful to listen or to watch.